Welcome to the Scaling Tech Podcast. I'm Arin Sime. This is part of a Mexico City interview series on AI engineering. I'm publishing the full conversations here on YouTube, and they'll also be featured in a special upcoming podcast episode. Subscribe to the Scaling Tech Podcast so you don't miss it, and find us at scalingtechpod.com.
I'm Arin Sime, host of the Scaling Tech Podcast, and I'm here today in Mexico City, Mexico, and I'm at the offices of Codifin with Pablo Fajer, Codifin's CEO. And we're going to talk about the quality of AI engineering talent here in Mexico, their experiences in recruiting that, finding that talent, and also their experiences in building AI-driven applications themselves. So, Pablo, thanks for joining me.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming, and it's a pleasure to talk about such interesting topics with you.
Well, and I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in Mexico, and so really appreciate you taking time to share some of your experiences around that. Let's start with telling us a little bit about who is Codifin and what do you do at Codifin?
Absolutely. So at Codifin, our main goal and our focus is helping U.S. companies mainly establish what we call capability centers in Mexico. So what we've seen is there has been two very important trends that we've seen has happened in the IT or tech space, which is one, a lot of companies are moving into in-house teams. They want to create value for the company, and therefore they are trying to develop, create technology with in-house team, being them the sole owners of that technology. And two, that to have them all in the US, it's very expensive. So obviously they are analyzing nearshore opportunities. Why? Because the talent that they're looking for isn't junior talent. It's senior talent that can use AI capabilities in order to develop stronger and more valuable products. And therefore that talent has to be in constant contact, very close to the product or service that they're giving. So that's why Mexico has become a prime location. And that's why we've seen a lot of companies trying to get into Mexico, but it becomes very complicated. So what we help them do is we help them build their teams, we help them administer the teams, and we help engage with these teams in Mexico so they can create these capability centers without all of the overall hassle of creating a center in Mexico.
Excellent. And so because you work with a lot of companies outside of Mexico, primarily in the US, as you said, what do they usually misunderstand about building teams here?
One, the talent. When they do their analysis or when they contact people in Mexico and say, hey, how's the talent in Mexico? Talent is amazing. You'll get to see, you have around the talent pool of 1 million developers. And they say, wow, so it's going to be very simple, very easy to hire this talent. When they get to Mexico, they say, you know what? That's not the case. Why? Because in Mexico, it's very separated in what we call the GCC talent with the overall talent. The overall talent is, yes, correct, around 1 million developers, around 900,000. But GCC talent is very different. It's bilingual talent. It's talent that comes from certain universities. It's talent that has the technical capabilities that most of these companies are looking for. So that's why when we talk about GCC talent, that reduces to around 20 to 25% of the overall talent. And that's the main issue that they have. They come to Mexico and they have such a hard time finding the correct talent.
Yeah.
And number two are all of the regulatory processes that they are not used to in the US. Mexico, for some reason, has very complicated payroll processes, registration processes, IMSS, statutory benefits, all of that stuff. They think it's simpler than it really is. And that's the second very complicated part whenever they establish themselves in Mexico. And I don't think I have seen a client that says, I have done it all by myself without any issues. I think that's the second most complicated part. And the third most complicated part is the engagement. So they come to Mexico and say, hey, I found the right talent. I'm okay that he's going to stay with me because he wants to grow with me, et cetera, et cetera. We've solved the issue. And then they realize 6 months after that talent has left. Why? Because when we're talking about GCC talent, all of the US companies are fighting for that specific talent. So you have to have engagement processes, engagement initiatives in order to be able to retain this talent.
Yeah. So you start with this pool of 900,000, 1 million engineers in Mexico, and we've got the time zone benefit of being lined up with the U.S. That's really helpful. There are some cost savings, which is which is helpful. But so they're coming here for those reasons, but then also availability of the talent. It's also hard to find that talent, regardless of cost in the U.S. A lot of competition for that. And so it's somewhat similar here in the sense that you also have to compete for the talent here.
Absolutely.
Right. So as you said, working on how to engage them, how to bring them in, and making sure that you're finding the talent that's not only has the technical skills you want, but also bilingual and works well with foreign companies and has some of that experience before, perhaps.
Exactly. And I mean, that type of talent, I think the biggest differential is how they're able to communicate the product and the development that they do. And it is hard to find. And you're talking about probably around 200,000 engineers that are able to do that.
Yeah.
And in Mexico City, it's probably around 90,000, 100,000 at most. And therefore, you have to have a partner who knows how to find this talent, who knows how to attract this talent, because this talent is working, is actively working. They're not sitting around saying, I'm just waiting for a post so I can join the company. They're actively working. So you have to track them down. And that's, I think, one of the biggest concerns that companies have. That they say, hey, I come here, I put a post in LinkedIn, and I think 200 people are going to apply and they're going to be the best match for me. That's a dream.
Doesn't work that way.
That doesn't work that way. Exactly.
Yeah. So how would you describe it? We've got this huge pool of talent that then we narrow down to maybe 90,000 in Mexico City, you said, maybe 200,000 in Mexico in general. How would you describe the overall quality of that talent once you've got it down to that pool? It's
unbelievable. And that's something that I've heard from most of our clients. Once they find this talent, they tell me, Pablo, it is much 100 times better than what I imagined. And not only from what they say, but we've seen it with the promotions that they have. With when we find that talent for these companies promote them so quickly because, one, it's talent that has worked. They come from top universities and they have worked with U.S. companies all of their life. So they already have that those skills, those technical skills, those communication skills that normally U.S. companies expect them to have. And number two, because since they're in the same time zone, hiring managers are so easy for them to come to Mexico, work with them, and these best practices translate so fast in Mexico. So that's why I think for these two main reasons, once you find that talent, companies usually are very surprised with the level that this talent has.
And how would you compare the talent in Mexico to other regions in LATAM?
So I think it's similar and LATAM behaves in a very similar way. You have the GCC talent in all of these locations that works very well. I think Mexico has a very big benefit of being so close to the U.S. There's around, I think, 700 flights daily. I think the longest from Mexico City to any place in the U.S. is probably at most 5 hours. So it is much easier for hiring managers in the U.S. to come to Mexico and work with their teams here. And I think that is an ability or a benefit that most companies can't quantify, but in reality is, for me, one of the most important parts. And in LATAM, you have countries like Brazil, who has even much more technical talent than in Mexico. But when you compare the bilingual levels, it's pretty much the same as in Mexico. And Brazil has very good hubs. The issue with Brazil is that a flight is going to be 12 hours. And so you cannot say, hey, I'm going to go 2 or 3 days to Mexico and come back. You can say that, but for Brazil, you can't because it's going to be a longer trip. We have Colombia that has good talent. I think in terms of the volume of talent, it's much lower than Mexico or Brazil. We've done our whole analysis of all the LATAM countries. I think the two prime locations I would probably say are Mexico and Brazil because of the bilingual volume of talent, because of the quality, and because of the government restrictions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, definitely in my experience too, working in LATAM, that ability to be able to meet with your team in person is huge. And I think it's very underestimated by people. It's not just about being in the same time zones where you can get on a video call any time of day with your team, but that you can go and visit them in person. You can go out for a cerveza after work, bond a little bit, get to know each other better. Those things make a huge difference. And it's nice staying close.
And I think it's not only about kind kind of passing these best practices in terms of development, but it's also about the engagement part. When the developers here are in constant contact, physical contact with their hiring managers in the US, they do feel as part of the company, and they do have that sense of loyalty, of the excitement of being and working with their hiring managers in the US.
So let's take another minute and talk a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about how it works in terms of like the capability centers and turning that over to the clients, or how you make that nearshore team also like their in-house team.
Absolutely. So the capability centers, at first, the general sense is these companies say, I want to have a center that can give service to either the US or my global operations. And so these centers are mostly tech centers. They can be back office centers as well, but mostly tech centers. And what this does is that they generally come to Mexico, and when they want to establish these centers, they find 1,000 different regulations, processes that could take them up to a year to be able to establish it alone. Just to get their entity going, it's around 4 to 5 months. So what we do is we say, hey, you don't have to wait a year before you start operating your teams. We know you want to scale, and we know you want to scale quickly. So let us facilitate that by using us as an EOR. We build these teams, we administer these teams, and we start building the functionalities that these clients need in order to operate them. Once we're able to build out these functionalities, then we transfer the teams to them, and slowly we start leaving them alone. I know it's something that a lot of companies say, hey, no, we need a lot of functionality still. But what we try to do is slowly say, okay, we'll stay with the payroll because that's very complicated.
Right.
But why don't you start doing your recruitment alone? Why don't you start doing your HR alone? Why don't you start doing the facilities alone? And slowly we leave that entity to them. So in around a year and a half, maybe 2 years, they're operating 100% by themselves.
Fantastic. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of Mexico and in general. We're going to spend probably the rest of our conversation talking more specifically about like AI engineering in Mexico, because that's obviously one of the most in-demand technical talents out there right now. And I want to start with hearing a little bit about your story of building your own application. So you've built an AI-driven application for recruiting, Codi. Tell us about Codi.
Yes. So what we did was we figured out that we had a talent pool of, as I said, 250, 300,000 engineers, and that we would be able to say whenever a request came from a client, we would, what our normal recruiters would do is go into that database of 300,000, which would include our internal database, because we've probably contacted even, 30% of all of that talent. Or they would go to external databases, LinkedIn, OCC, CompuTrabajo, in order to find that talent. And what we started to realize is that it was a process that we could absolutely automate. And so what we did was we have a Codi, or our AI agent, that what he does is whenever we get this request, he will analyze the request, analyze this company generally hires from these universities, generally has this type of talent, generally wants these technical skills, but also the soft skills. They look for lower attrition, higher attrition, top company, etc. And it will go into our internal database and look for candidates that match these requirements. If he doesn't find them in our internal database, he will go to external databases in order to find this talent. So what used to take us around 2 to 3 weeks to find a very good talent pool, right now it takes us around 2 to 3 minutes. And so what that has helped us do is that our recruiters are now actually recruiters and our consultants. So they will find that talent, they will call them, they will select them, and they will actually recommend to the client only the top performers. So Codi has automated probably around 80% of what we used to do for recruitment. And I think the most valuable part about this is that we haven't reduced one recruiter. We've actually increased our recruitment team by almost 3 times the last year. And that is not because, hey, we've reduced 80% and now we can still do the same job, but just with 80% less people. Well, our mission is, hey, if we reduce 80%, let's give more value to a client with more people. And that's kind of like where our human touch is and where our focus has been.
Brilliant. I love that. So it's you're using Codi for a lot of that upfront part of the search and finding of candidates and maybe initial contact, right? But you've still got that, human in the loop and more humans in the loop than before to evaluate soft skills and talk to them before presenting to the client. So
absolutely. And it's value that at the end of the day, they get used to it. And that's what I always say about AI. It's not about, hey, what what can I still do with that, with less people? I think that's kind of like the idea that a lot of people have. Hey, AI is I can give the same product with less people. No, I can give a 20 or 30 times better service with the same or even more people. And that's what we have to get our clients used to, that type of service. Now, when we send candidates, we send them in less time. We send better candidates. We send them better prepared, and we send them with much more information that we used to do without Codi AI.
I think that's a great attitude, a great way to think about it. I mean, I think when companies only look at AI as a cost-saving measure, or also if they only look at nearshoring as a cost-saving measure, I think that's a little narrow thinking, and that they need to expand their thinking, that it's not just about, obviously cost efficiency by any means is always important in a business, but looking at that not simply as a way to reduce one side of the P&L statement, but to make sure that we are also providing more value so that we can grow the market with our customers.
Absolutely.
So I really like that approach. So I'm curious, in building that application from maybe a technical perspective, you could say, what was the hardest thing to get right about building Codi? Was it like sourcing the candidates or scoring them against each other, reaching out to them? What was most complicated?
So probably our most important issue that we had initially was that at the end of the day, these models are very new and they hallucinate a lot. So we would get these hallucinations and the percentage of our matches would be very good, but suddenly we would get people that I would say, why are we recommending him? And it's something that the AI hallucinates. So, and when they read CVs and the AI reads CVs, we have right now around the 92% accuracy, but we started with a 42% accuracy. So at first we'd say, this is so new that it doesn't work at all, because we still have to redo all of the job, because at the end of the day, the AI is recommending 50% of the skills that are needed. And so we had to create certain AIs in order to rate our AI. And so a lot of different loops that we created generated that level of accuracy. And I think that's probably the biggest factor right now with coding with AI or creating AI products, the level of accuracy that you can generate with this. Because at the end of the day, if they don't have the accuracy that is required, then it doesn't work at all. Yeah. And I think that was probably our biggest factor at the beginning.
That makes sense. So initially you saw a lower level of quality or success than you wanted, but by building in, it sounds like, some supervisor agents sort of help evaluate, as well as sort of human evaluation of things, and refining the model over time, you get up to, you said 92% accuracy, which is fantastic.
Which now is something that we can say, hey, we'll get probably an 8% where it doesn't make sense, but that's why we have our recruiters doing all of the filtering as well. Yeah. When we had that 60% that weren't correct, the recruiters, our same recruiters would say, Pablo, I'm just wasting my time here. Like, you're recommending people that from initially that I shouldn't be even interviewing. And I think that's kind of like the shift of what we've seen with development, that these developers, and I've seen it with a lot of centers that come to Mexico, the developers are not like the standard developers anymore. They become architects. Mm-hmm. And that's the value of it. They become architects, and they can create these architectures in order to ensure that the code that they're delivering is the best, is fast, and it's of the highest quality.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about like the engineering talent, the AI engineering talent specifically in Mexico. So everything you just described in Codi AI is very impressive. You've done all of that with talent here in Mexico City. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and finding the talent to build it, and maybe how even that talent perhaps had to iterate in building an application like this.
So I think in terms of the talent here in Mexico, I think they have been, and I would say probably in all of LATAM, they are very aware of what they can do and what AI does better than them. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is important, because most of them have become kind of like this mix of saying, hey, I know AI can do this better. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm going to use it in order to enable more code, faster code, etc. And so, and talking a bit about what I was saying, when I used to connect with my team, I started to realize that one, they become like prompt engineers a lot. They start creating prompts that are better and better and better and better. And two, they do become architects. Yeah. The value of the software engineering community right now is how they're able to create systems, how they're able to create models that ensure that the code that they used to provide, and now AI provides a lot of it, is good code. And I think that's the biggest concern that most companies have. How much do I leave AI to do? And we don't get to a point where we say, hey, most of this code is very superficial. And I think that's kind of like what we've seen. And the requests that we get are a lot of architects and data. And a lot of the talent that I've seen is shifting towards those types of parameters. They're becoming more architects and they're becoming more data-led developers.
Yeah. And here again, by becoming more architecturally driven in the engineering talent and thinking data-driven, they also, in order to work closely with the clients in the U.S. or wherever, they have to have those strong bilingual skills, so the strong communication skills, again, reinforces the value of the time zones as well as geographic proximity for traveling and working together in person too. So yeah, would you say that like that sort of shift in mindset in developers then is that the biggest change that you're seeing in tech talent in Mexico? And is that only a portion of the talent that's sort of making that shift?
I think a lot of the talent is starting to kind of realize that that's the future of it. Mm-hmm. And when we see the volume of capability centers, we've actually seen that we don't see the capability centers of 10,000 engineers, 15,000 engineers. We're seeing a capability center of 200, 300 engineers, mm-hmm. which are engineers that are able to do this. So a lot of this talent, for one, is trying to learn English. All of the IT talent that I contact with, and maybe for local companies that don't require that level of English, I always say you have to take English classes, and all of them are taking English classes because they see that huge step in their career. And second of all, all of them are trying to get into that architectural sense of coding because that's kind of like the future that they're seeing.
Mm-hmm. And in a capability center of say 200 or 300 engineers, how many of them are what you might call more like a junior engineer and sort of building up to the level of the others? You know, how do you handle that in recruiting a team of having any sort of blend of junior versus senior talent?
So before, and I think like the standard, it was like a pyramid,
right?
Where you had the L1s were the majority, probably 40%, and you had the L2s were a bit less, L3s and L4s, and maybe a staff engineering, the manager. Well, and that's kind of like the standard of what we used to see in all the capability centers, and that they had their perfect pyramid. Now we're seeing more of I don't know if it's called a diamond or a rump, I don't know what's it called, but it's in the middle. So you have fewer L1s, you have a lot of L2s and a lot of L3s, and fewer L4s. And I think that's kind of like the structure that most of these capability centers are having. And one of the most important parts of how they structure this is how you create a capability center where it's not like a staffing capability center where people in the US just have requests and people in Mexico do them and send them over. What they try to do is have their modular teams here in Mexico so they can create value. And like you said it perfectly, it's not only about reducing cost, it's about creating additional value. And that's why we see these, I don't know if the right word is rumpus, I'm not sure, like the reverse square, but that's kind of like the structure that you have right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So it's benefiting the introduction of AI into these roles, and the way that's changing is benefiting that like mid to senior level talent more so perhaps than like the maybe the staff engineers, the L4s at the very top.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely,
makes sense. What do you think? How do you decide, and how did you decide in the development of Codi, for example? What would you recommend to people of how to decide between how much of the application is completely AI first and AI driven versus more human driven?
In terms of the product, or
maybe your lessons from Codi, but if you were giving advice to say one of your clients who's building an AI engineering team here in Mexico for a big AI driven application that they're building, and they're like, hey, based on your experience, how do I know where to put humans in the loop and where to let AI kind of run a little more free?
I still think that AI shouldn't run free at all. I think that you should enable all of your developers to use it, to use Cursor, to use all of the different tools that you have, but they have to be solely responsible of the product that they give. Mm-hmm. And so, now obviously times are much quicker. So time to product is probably 5 or 6 times faster than it used to be. But what that helps you do is iterate and make it a much better product. So I don't think that it's, hey, let's run this with AI and then you create these systems, etc. It's about, hey, the same as before, but let's just create a bigger, faster, and better product.
Yeah. But standardizing across the team, not only in the capability center here in Mexico, but lined up with maybe the home office in the US or wherever, right? That they're using standard AI engineering practices across.
Absolutely. And they have to be integrated in that kind of hierarchy. So it can't be the L4 staff engineers managers in the US and just the L3s, L2s, L1s here in Mexico. It has to be a kind of like something integrated between them.
Perfect. All right, so kind of starting to wrap up here, but I really appreciate the time with us, Pablo. What would you say is kind of in looking ahead the next couple of years, how do you think both AI tooling for developers as well as like AI engineering in general and the things that we can build, how does that change? How do you see that changing the teams that you'll be building in Mexico for your clients?
So I think they're going to be leaner teams. I have a hard time imagining what we used to see of 20,000, 30,000 engineers. And I think they're going to be very, very, very high impact teams, high performing teams in Mexico who are expected to do a lot. But I think the ownership that they will be given is going to be much higher than before. So capability centers is going to change kind of like that sense of, hey, capability centers is there to give service to our overall company. I think now it's going to be more about an innovation hub, saying, hey, we have this innovation hub. We have to give them the ownership in order for them to release products. And with how fast they can iterate and how fast they can release code, I think we're going to see smaller teams, but with much, much more value than what we used to be seeing as just people who give service to the overall global company.
Yeah, so thinking about these nearshore teams in your organization as an innovation center, as you said, and that they're going to be lean and high impact, as well as being highly efficient. So
absolutely
fantastic.
Yeah.
So my last question for you then, Pablo, if a CTO or a CEO is listening into this, watching us and considering Mexico for the first time, what would you tell them to focus on first as they think about expanding their engineering team into Mexico?
I think first is about designing the correct structure. Before jumping in, before saying, hey, let's start hiring, it's important to have a very kind of easy to see or a very clear structure of how that your team is going to integrate to the US, what you can offer them, because Mexico, the people know their value. They know these types of engineers know their value, and they value a lot how much they can grow within a company. So you have to have a very good design phase in order to ensure that the developers that you hire know how they can grow within your company and how they can integrate to the overall strategy of your company. And I think second, take the next step, because I haven't seen anyone not satisfied with a Mexican talent here.
Fantastic. Well, so if we're going to call them an innovation center, if we're going to expect these teams to be high impact, then we need to make sure that those engineers in the team see their overall role and value in the organization. So yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Pablo, thank you so much for your time. Where can our viewers learn more about your work at Codifin?
I think you can go to our website, codifin.com, and we have a lot of information, a lot of demographic information for you to start considering Mexico.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the time.
Enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. This conversation will be part of our upcoming Scaling Tech podcast episode on AI engineering in Mexico. Like, subscribe, and check out more at scalingtechpod.com.